Good afternoon to you, Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com, here with your hurricane outlook and discussion from Monday, the 27th of July, 2015. Starting the tour off with a look at sea surface temperature anomalies. Clearly the El Nino festering here in the Pacific, though it's lost just a little bit of its edge out here in what we call the Nino 3.4 region, basically shaved off about 1/10 of a degree Celsius. So maybe it's reached its peak. We'll see. We'll take a look at that closer, maybe later in the week. More emphasis on the El Nino. Notice, too, that the tropical Atlantic continues to try to warm up just a little bit. Positive anomalies stretching out farther and farther west from the coast of Africa. And then even the Caribbean starting to warm up a little bit compared to the long-term average. In fact, if we go back just to the beginning of this month, you can clearly see the change here. There was a lot more blue in the deep tropics at the beginning of July than there is now. So maybe things are changing just a little bit. As I said in my discussion last week, we'll see about that. There are other factors. Just warm water alone isn't going to give us hurricanes, but it helps. And, we'll see how this trend goes. We're still about a month away from the peak of the hurricane season really starting to ramp up. But it's interesting to monitor the sea surface temperature anomaly trends and see which way they're going, up or down. So what's going on out there as of today? The National Hurricane Center has nothing forecast in the Atlantic for the next 48 hours, and the same generally holds true for the next 5 days. In the eastern Pacific, a couple of areas to watch here out way away from the Baja and mainland Mexico. No worries there whatsoever. Both of these systems, even if they develop, and they probably will because the Pacific has been quite the hotbed, quite literally, for development this season so far. Both of these areas will probably move away from the coast of Mexico and the Baja, not even bringing any moisture northeastward into the desert southwest of the United States. I don't see that happening this time, and probably not even a threat to Hawaii, so we'll just keep an eye on it to be sure. So overall, the tropics are quiet. Now going back to the Atlantic, even though there's nothing on the tropical weather outlook in terms of possibility for development, we do have this little weak area of low pressure associated with this surface trough, the stalled front, draped across the southwest Atlantic, stretching out past Bermuda into the Atlantic and into the Gulf of Mexico as well, where a weak area of low pressure has formed to the northwest of Tampa. We can get a better look at it here. Doesn't take much imagination to see that, yeah, we do have low pressure sitting in here. Showers and thunderstorms from time to time over the peninsula of Florida, even down here into southwest Florida. Very heavy rain at times associated with this. And normally we would say, wow, that could develop. We look at the sea surface temperatures, and you say, yes, sirree, Bob, that's probably going to be a named storm before too long. 30 degrees Celsius water temps, meaning that the actual temperatures there, Fahrenheit, in the upper 80s. But again, warm water alone is not enough. If we look at the upper level winds, that really tells us what we need to know. Very strong northeast flow going across the system like this, across it, in one direction, and that is not going to work. You have to have uniform flow, very light, from about 5,000 feet in the atmosphere way on up to about 40,000 feet. Basically the thickness of the cloud mass of the developing storm or hurricane. If the wind is blowing across the top of it, it's very similar to having a boiling pot of noodles, and you have all that froth coming up, and you take a plate and you fan it, and the convection of the boiling noodles drops, and you keep it from spilling over onto your stove. Well, the same kind of thing holds true in the tropics here. If the wind blows across a potentially developing system, it blows the thunderstorms away from the low pressure, and lo and behold, you can see that, those upper level winds coming this way, and that's blowing or displacing the thunderstorms away from the developing low pressure center. And it also injects a little bit of dry air into the mix. And the bottom line is you just don't get tropical development. Here's another way to visualize. You have these wind barbs in here, these little flags at different levels of the atmosphere, and they're all lined up going the same way. And It just amounts to flow across the system instead of letting it fan out uniformly. And so it's not going to develop. I mean, maybe a little bit more, but I really doubt it because this upper level high is going to pretty much hold strong, and that northeasterly flow is going to sit there for quite a while as the low tracks across Florida and then out into the Atlantic, and that'll be that. In fact, the pattern itself, you remember last week I was showing you the GFS forecasting the MJO to kind of go wild out here into phases 1 and 2. Well, it's really changed its tune. Now showing basically no MJO activity anywhere around the globe, and basically that means no organized areas and large-scale areas of upward motion or favorability anywhere around the tropics. The Euro also showing the MJO in this null phase, as we call it, and it's suggesting amplification eventually here back into the Western Pacific. So the next week to 10 days is probably going to be fairly quiet globally, and then as we get into August, a ramping up again in the Pacific, and then we'll have to see if maybe the MJO, just by natural progression of the season, climatologically speaking, that we get it to come around and have some kind of an amplification in the Atlantic Basin. At some point, we will gradually shift the needle towards more development potential just by default, because we're getting into August, especially later August and into September, where the MJO can help, but it's not as much of an influence as the natural climate change towards more favorability, really. But right now, things look very quiet over the next week to 10 days or so. And I guess that's good news, right? Especially if you have interest along the coast. Nothing to worry about there. All right, well, that's it from me for today. Nothing really to talk about tomorrow. So I'm going to come back on Wednesday, and I want to talk about our brand new generation of storm surge cameras that we're going to be using for storm surge monitoring, observation, and research, how we plan to utilize these in the next hurricane landfall. We know it's just a matter of time. Is it going to be this year? I don't know. Maybe next year. We'll see. Especially when the next significant storm surge event producing hurricane hits, where we get one of these 10, 15, 20-foot storm surges. These cameras are going to be very important in showing the public what's happening, emergency management, researchers, media, and they've come a long way over the past 10 years since we developed them in the 05 season, and I'm going to show you the evolution of that, basically show you a PowerPoint, if you will, but record it on video and narrate what you're seeing, and really give you an introduction as to this brand new generation of storm surge cameras and how we think they're going to be very effective in showing us all a very lethal and devastating effect from tropical cyclones. I'll do that for us on Wednesday afternoon, so look for that on that day. Until then, have a great Monday, and be safe out there if you're headed for any travel, especially in Florida. Those heavy rains can cause ponding of the water on roadways, so be careful out there. We want you back to be able to enjoy and learn something from these Outlook videos. All right? Again, I'm Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com. Thanks so much for tuning in, as always, and we'll speak again on Wednesday afternoon.